So far in Game Week 25, I'm sitting on 54 points in 31k overall. And barring any disasters, here is my team selection ahead of Game Week 26. Now, I said barring any disasters because I'm recording this video ahead of the Aston Villa-Liverpool game on the Wednesday night. So you can see here, we've got Unai Emery, Trent, Salah and Rodgers all to play in that game. Well, potentially to play in that game. We'll see if there's any surprises of people being left out. They're all still to play, so that could affect my end points total. But ultimately, I think my rank will largely stay as it is. I don't really think there's going to be a whole lot that could happen in that game to completely change my rank. I think I've got coverage, apart from maybe the manager, of all of kind of the popular picks. Outside of that, my three defenders that aren't Trent, all conceding. Sells, Aina, Robinson, all essentially blanking. Sells got me 1 bonus point for his saves. Semenyo with an assist, but picked up a yellow card for 4 points against Southampton. Another blank for Cole Palmer. Another blank for Morgan Rodgers. Well, in the first game that he played of the two. Salah is my captain so far on 16 points. Brian and Mbeumo with a blank, although they did. Somehow Brentford kept a clean sheet in that game. Isak and Chris Wood, who scored and got me 9 points. So that's how my team's looking at the moment. Like I said, 54 points, 31k overall. The first decision for me to take then is what do I do with Unai Emery, who is currently my assistant manager. What I've got here is a view of the Game Week 26 projected points for all of the managers in the game. You can see here you got the top 4. Arteta, who I would say is probably the most likely manager to win their game. He obviously won't get any table bonus against West Ham, but he's got a 77% win likelihood according to the betting data that Rob TFPL produces. And then you've got 3 managers who have less, obviously, a lower win percentage, but are playing teams that they could potentially get table bonus from. And my favourite of the lot so far has got to be Oliver Glasner. I think Crystal Palace definitely have the ability to get a result out of Fulham. Whether or not they actually win the game, I don't know. But based on the points we got from David Moyes for drawing against Liverpool, for example, you know, the table bonus still counts if you draw the game. So yeah, for me, I think I'm going to go for Oliver Glasner as my assistant manager pick. He seems, I would say, provided the results go the right way in the Aston Villa-Liverpool game, to leave 5 places between Fulham and Crystal Palace. I think Glasner is going to be my assistant manager. But yeah, things change in that Liverpool-Villa game. Might go just for Arteta. But that does leave me in a bit of a hole when it comes to finances, because Glasner is exactly the same price as Unai Emery. The next thing to think about when making transfers or just any general decisions around my team is the blank and double game week picture coming up. Now, I'm going to start talking about this now so it sets the picture of how this is going to affect my decision making in my team. So we're in Game Week 25 at the moment. I'm not going to talk about those fixtures. Game Week 29, we've got a blank for Aston Villa, Liverpool, Newcastle, Crystal Palace. As you can remember from my team, I currently have Morgan Rodgers, Gakpo, Trent, Salah, Lewis Hall and Isak. So that's 6 assets in my team at the moment. Obviously, Unai Emery doesn't really count because he'll be gone by Game Week 29, whatever happens. So 6 assets in my team. I've got 3 game weeks essentially to sell them ahead of Game Week 29. I'm warming up to the idea of dead ending into Game Week 29, using my transfers to make sure I have the absolute best team possible for 29. And then wildcarding a majority of those players back in for Game Week 30, but also using that wildcard and being like cognizant of the double game week in 32. So Newcastle, Crystal Palace have a double in 32. And then Game Week 33 is also likely to be a double game week by the looks of things. The Game Week 32 one is confirmed, if you didn't already know. Game Week 33 could be one for Villa, Man City, Man United and Bournemouth. So all of those teams as well could also double in 33. So what we're looking at here is a potential double-double. A double in 32 followed by a double in Game Week 33. And in terms of chips that I've got left, I've got my free hit, which I will probably deploy in Game Week 34 because that's looking like the blank game week I will probably need to use a chip for the most. So I'm going to reserve it for Game Week 34, I think. I've also got my bench boost. And I'm looking at Game Week 33 there as a potential opportunity to use that bench boost. So a wild card in Game Week 30. Set up for Game Week 32 and potentially for a bench boost in 33. All right, so here's how I'm going to line up defensively and looking at my assistant manager. It's going to cost me a transfer, so I'm on 2 free transfers after moving Emery out for Glasner. Like I said, I think Glasner is probably my pick of the assistant managers. Let me know in the comments, by the way, who your favourite assistant manager is going into Gameweek 26. Sells in goal, Trent, Hall and Robinson. I've got to say, the 3 of Sells, Hall and Trent, I'm not all that massively confident on this week. Both Sells and Hall are playing each other. You know, Nottingham Forest and Newcastle. I've got a feeling both teams score, so I'm not sure I'm going to get any clean sheets from those two. Trent, I would imagine Man City score in that game as well, so I'm hoping that maybe he gets some attacking returns points or some bonus or something like that. But I can't really justify starting Aina over Trent, I don't think, and the same sort of principle applies with Robinson. I know I'm backing Glasner to get a result, but I think with just how good Robinson has been for me this season and just in general, I have to start him. It was a tough, I guess, sort of tough decision to leave out Aina, but the thought of being doubled up on Nottingham Forest defence when they play Newcastle away, I just feel like Newcastle will be on a little bit of a redemption arc to overturn to get revenge on their previous results, basically. Similar to, funnily enough, what Nottingham Forest did against Brighton, if you remember that. They won 7-0 off the back of a defeat. So, yeah, that's probably how I'm going to line up defensively. I mentioned him on my transfer plans video, but one player that is a bit of a bugbearer for me is Morgan Rogers at the moment. And I just know with Morgan Rogers, as soon as I get rid of him from my team, he's going to score. And I completely foresee him being able to score against Chelsea, especially at Villa Park, right? In the 5 appearances he's made, obviously I haven't covered the Liverpool game here because it hasn't happened at the time I'm recording this video. He's got 1 attacking return. Against Ipswich, to be fair, he could have had an absolute hatful in that game, but it just didn't come to fruition. All of his goals in, I would say, good performances have really come in cups. So in the Champions League, and I think it was the Carabao Cup, wasn't it, or the League Cup? Oh, sorry, the FA Cup, one of the two. The cups get a bit confusing for me, apologies. But yeah, all of his good performances for Villa recently have been in cup competitions, where obviously you don't score any points from FPL. But because he's put in those good performances, you know, he's not discriminating against the Premier League with his performances, right? You're probably going to laugh at me for how I worded that. But, you know, he's got the potential to score points and do well. And I actually think the next 3 fixtures for Rodgers are pretty good. Chelsea, Palace, Brentford are all games where, come on, I mean, Villa and he could quite easily be involved in some goals. So I do think, though, he's been frustrating in the Premier League recently, and particularly with how well Bournemouth have been playing and how well these 3 have been playing. You know, there is some justification, I think, to sell Rodgers for another Bournemouth midfielder. I've already got Semenyo, of course. What I've done here is just a comparison between the 3. Obviously, I've got Cliver and Dango to choose from. With his selling price for me, Rodgers might be 5.7 million in the game at the moment, but with the value that I actually bought him at, Rodgers' sell value for me is 5.4. So I think might be able to just stretch to Cliver if I make other moves. But for me, if I were to sell Rodgers, I'd have to do it for Dango, which I don't think is too bad. And to be honest, of the 3 at the moment, of very, very recent games, he seems to be the one in form, and he's certainly the one playing that centre-forward role at least. So, you know, could potentially do Rodgers to Dango. Ultimately, though, I'm probably sometimes a bit too patient for my own good, but I don't see it being worth a transfer at this stage just yet. I think I really need to save my transfers for Game Week 29 and make my moves. You know, I could conceivably quite easily keep Rodgers right up until Game Week 29 in that blank. Just get rid of him for 29, use my transfers then. Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Brentford. You know, the performances he's put in the Cup suggest, you know, there's goals and assists in him. And those 3 fixtures, I think, are pretty decent. And my worst nightmare is I get rid of him now in kind of a luxury move for someone like Dango, with obviously that blank in 29 in mind. But Dango gets injured in that 3 game week period and Rodgers just absolutely smashes it. That could happen if I were to get rid of him. And just with that, that's like the worst fear in my mind. I'm a little bit worried about that happening. And also, I just think, again, going back to those performances he's put in the Cup and how dangerous he looked in that Ipswich game, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot to separate Dango and Rodgers in that 3 game week period. You can clip that and I'll come back to it in a few game weeks' time. But you know, genuinely, with what I've seen from Rodgers recently, I've been impressed with his performances in the Cup and obviously in the game against Ipswich. He was unlucky, I think, not to come away from that game with some returns. So I think I'm going to keep the faith with Rodgers. I've got Semenyo as my other Bournemouth midfielder, and there's no justification to get rid of him. Like I said, I think probably Dango is the best of the three on very, very recent form. And just, I think Kluivert's the number one just because he's on penalties. So Semenyo is actually, in my mind, the third best Bournemouth midfielder, but the one that I've got in my team at the moment. But there's just no justification to swap Semenyo for another Bournemouth midfielder, is there? I'm just going to stick with Semenyo and hope he does the business against Wolves. And Bumo with Leicester away. You know, I'd actually, if you didn't back Salah as your captain against Man City, which I think I do, by the way, I think Mbumo against Leicester away could be a really interesting differential captaincy shout. Alongside Mbumo, I've got Cole Palmer. A lot of people losing patience and faith in Cole Palmer. For me, I just can't bring myself to sell him. I look at the 3 fixtures they've got coming up. Aston Villa, who have one fit centre-back at the moment, I believe. Southampton at home, and then Leicester at home after that. Yeah, that's 3 pretty good fixtures where I think Chelsea and Cole Palmer could conceivably score in all of them. So for me, and also, who would you sell him for if you did get rid of him? I don't see the logic of getting rid of him, basically. So he'll be sticking around. And Salah, yeah, it's just a case with Salah as to whether you captain him against Man City. I've got another sort of Rodgers-centred dilemma in my front line. So you can see there, I've had him on my bench throughout the team that I've showed you. But I've got Cody Gakpo sitting on my bench there. He obviously blanks in Game Week 29. He's not going to play Aston Villa. And ultimately, I'm not sure I'm just going to say I'm not sure I'm going to start him. I probably would on occasion start him over Rodgers. But I'd also say he's in a perfect position to be transferred out. And I've got a bit of a decision to make, right? Do I just roll my transfer, see this 3-5-2 team and just stick with it? So I say roll. I've used one on Emery to Glasner, but I rolled the other 2. Play Rodgers, don't do the Gakpo to, I'm going to say it. I'm looking at Cunha, basically. I want to bring in Cunha. I think Wolves' fixtures coming up are really good. They don't blank in Game Week 29, and obviously Cunha's just been absolutely insane for them this season, and recently his form has just continued. The thing with Cunha is, though, I'm not saying he's a bad player or anything. He's got Bournemouth away as his fixture in Game Week 26. And I think Bournemouth are one of the strongest defences in the league over the last, couple of months. So it's just a case of, should I really use a transfer to swap Gakpo for Cunha, who has Bournemouth away, and then I would probably start Cunha ahead of Rodgers. So I've used a transfer, I'm benching Rodgers against Chelsea at home. Or do I just roll the transfer, don't bring in Cunha, allow myself to get up to 3 transfers next week, and come Game Week 29, who knows, I might even have 5 transfers in the bank to really dead end my team. I'm of the mind right now to probably roll. And that just leaves me to share what my final team's going to look like. 3-5-2, the defenders and midfielders that I suggested. I don't think I'm going to take out Morgan Rodgers unless something absolutely crazy happens in the Liverpool game and he gets injured or sent off or whatever. I think he's probably going to stay in my team. The one thing that does worry me a little bit is the yellow cards. He's picked up 3 on his 5 that he had already, so he's on 8. He only needs 2 more for a ban. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried about him collecting those yellow cards, but I guess, you know, I'll have the transfers to deal with it if that problem comes around. And it's just a case, if he does get that yellow card, just take him out early, right? You just use that blank Game Week 29 transfer on him early. I just have a feeling he can do something against Chelsea, and the subsequent fixtures afterwards are really good as well. It's really hard to justify selling Morgan Rodgers for me. For one game week alone, Cunha might outscore him, but I think long term, Cunha and Dango could outscore him, but I think long term I'm best off holding on to that transfer just to get myself better set up for Game Week 29, because I just think of that worst case scenario. You know, I bring in Cunha, use a transfer on him, bring in Dango, use a transfer on him. Either one of them get injured or sent off or something crazy, whereas, you know, Rodgers he's still a good asset in this game, right? He's still a good player, still a good asset, proving that he can score goals and get assists for Aston Villa, just isn't in the Premier League. So getting rid of him, using a transfer, I'm opting against it. And yeah, Salah's going to be my captain. I've heard a couple of people murmuring about going for Isak, but for me, Salah has, I think, a pretty decent record against Man City. It's probably just in my head, to be honest, but every time I see Liverpool and Man City play, Salah gets amongst the goals. I don't see that being any different. With how attacking Guardiola can play, I think that he might be a little bit exposed against Salah in that game. I guess wait and see what happens. So yeah, That's my team. Providing any disasters in the Liverpool-Villa game, that's how I'll be lining up. And if there are any disasters, I'll make another video about it. Alright, well that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. If you did, please leave me a like rating, and you can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video.